3 officers are dead, 2 others injured. Last week, of course, we watched the horror of a mass shooting in Moncton. At the time of the police hunt, the alleged gunman, we told you about him. We talked about his name, his Facebook page. We also showed you his picture. That's because it was an active investigation in the public's interest to name him. Well, now he's been charged, and Sun News Network has taken the position that we will no longer name him and we will no longer show you his pictures, because we feel at this network it is more important not to let him go down in a blaze of glory, and it's more important to give the attention to the victims and their families. Let's bring in Ray Hurd to talk about this. You're a former news director. You've run a newsroom on this. We've taken a position here. You know, in all my years of reporting, I always knew that when it came to suicides, the media gathered together, and we don't cover them for a reason, because we don't want copycats. Do the networks have to do the same in these things to start stopping, curbing them?
The good news is Sun is ahead of the curve. Sun is leading in this area, but on Saturday, the Globe and Mail had a wonderful column by Elizabeth Renzetti, whom I happen to know, which actually echoed what the Sun had already said. I'm not sure she'd read our position, but she agrees. And there are precedents for major media not publishing names of mass killers and their propaganda. And I'll give you 2 examples. One is the most successful show in the history of TV. 60 Minutes had a piece on mass murder recently. They did not mention the killer. And also on Fox News, Megyn Kelly, who is a very successful
Well, she's
anchor,
the up-and-coming face of American media.
She did the same. So what Sun is doing is we're ahead, we're the leaders here, but I see this developing as a much more common practice with some obvious exceptions.
Well, okay, look, on the news side of things, there are going to come points when our viewers will say, well, hold on a second, Sun has just said his name. When it comes to court proceedings, or that they're in the public interest, that you have the information about whether he pleads out, whether charges are added, you have to name him. I understand that. But we will, as a network,
court cases
we will not go out of our way to name him or give him any more attention.
But the same, Alex, applies to minors. You're not allowed to publish the name of minors, and there are lots of public bans that judges, as you know better than I do, impose on sensitive information.
Anything that compromises any kind of investigation or hearing.
All of this is important, and it's kind of sad that if I asked you now, or someone else who'd covered crime, most people who have memories and of a certain age know the name, Mark Lepine, of the Montreal massacre. I bet you and I can't mention the name of one of his 14 victims, who happen all to be women. So this confirms our point. Shakespeare said, the evil that men do lives after them, the good is often interred with their bones. And this applies especially now, and our challenge as journalists is much more difficult today than it was when I edited a mainstream newspaper, because social media wasn't there. With social media, it goes viral, and not only does it go viral, but it gets willfully or accidentally misinterpreted in a matter of milliseconds. So this in turn can create other problems, backlashes. I do have to admit that I have one question for you. The parents of the alleged killer in Moncton have said some pretty interesting things about how the mother especially tried to get him help. And they are mentioning the names of the parents. Would you apply the ban to the parents as well as to their son? That's my question.
Well, no. I look at the parents in this situation as victims as well.
Yes,
because
terrible victims.
They now have to live with the fact that their child is accused of this, of taking someone else's loved ones, and they've also lost their child.
Yes.
And so they're feeling pain too. You know, I've covered so many court cases where I literally sit with the victims and get to know them, and they are forgotten about. They feel completely lost in the system. But on the other side, a lot of times you'll see that those of the accused who sit, and they always end up sitting by themselves, and they're completely ostracized from the process because they're considered the bad guys. It's very, very, and we saw it in the case out in Alberta with that mass shooting where the father came out right away and said, I'm hurting what I did, my son is accused of doing. You know, I feel it too. He came right out, and of course the public was able to say, hey, hold on a second, he's a victim too. These parents are the same, where they're speaking out and
especially, Alex, where they try to get help, because part of this problem is a mental health problem.
Sure it
and
is.
I've found, and I've been a reporter for a long time, one of the encouraging things about this whole situation is, do you know who give the families and even the killers and the victims the best chance? Are the police. The police understand this. They do their best to keep these differing groups of people, families, the relatives of the people who killed. It's a difficult job. There's no perfection here. All you can do is to do what Sun News is doing, and that is strive to reach a situation where we are not responsible for propagandizing the hateful words, and often, to be honest with you, the sick words. A lot of them are ill people.
Sure.
There is some social responsibility there, and
well, it is.
a moral
It's like
responsibility.
suicides. There's a reason you don't see them in the news, because you get copycats. People saying, oh, they're getting attention, I want that attention. The accused Luca Magnotta comes to mind. Here's a guy who made his whole life about being seen and wanting his 15 minutes of fame. Well, he's got his 15 minutes of fame. He got wall-to-wall coverage for these horrific allegations and the videotaped of what he's alleged to have done. And again, this guy, who's now accused, made very public statements on social media. And sure, during the investigative process, as he was, look, he was out on the street, and it was a public interest for us to get that information out. I don't think it's our public interest. I think it's in the courts. You leave it, and let's focus on those who have been left behind to pick up the pieces of their lives.
Totally agree
And they're
with that.
always the people that are forgotten about. We won't talk about these 3 RCMP officers in 2 months. We'll have moved on to something else. And these people will be left with shattered lives for the next, until their dying day.
And I think that there have been some good academic studies written about copycat killers.
Sure.
There is no doubt that when someone like the crazy guy who dressed up as the Joker in the movie theater in Arizona, and he actually hit more people, he didn't kill more, but he hit well over 100, but he was doing it to achieve notoriety, which he did, and also, one suspects, and this is based on looking at social media, to incite or encourage other people to do the same thing.
And we're going to bring Gina Phillips into this conversation because, as you well know, Gina, a lot of times, the Luca Magnottas or those who are accused, they end up getting fan bases on Facebook.
Exactly.
And I don't know if it's just ignorant teens or ignorant folks who want to become part of the story, but we've got a pretty gross cycle going right now in society.
Well, one thing that social media allows is an insight into the motivation behind the killings. It's sort of a look into the killer's mind. We saw that with Luca Magnotta. I mean, we were uncovering all of this information. He had blogs, pictures, video, Facebook pages, all of this that he left behind, and it gives a killer a chance to leave behind any message that they want. And I think that with Magnotta, it was kind of this opportunity for media to access that, so we showed all of it. But now, it's getting old. And also, I think that we're realizing that if somebody who is accused for something leaves behind a message that seems daunting, or maybe some sad song lyrics, we don't have to show that. And it's almost broadcasting it for them. And so I think that at least I have, as a social media reporter, really kind of changed my mind about all of that. And as far as Sun News Network making the decision to not broadcast the accused killer's name, people are just all over this, retweeting and posting and saying, thank you, Sun, for doing this. I hope other media outlets do the same. It's one thing for Facebook, our Facebook fans, to be complimenting us for that. It's a whole other thing to have people say, hey, I don't even like you guys, but I agree with what you're doing in this case.
It's interesting. I mean, look, we did it because we made the decision last week to do it. Even at the time when we were reporting the situation, Ray, we were told, we had a conversation about it. Let's not give this person more attention than we should.
There's another ominous dimension to this whole discussion. What about terrorism? Today, terrorists attacked a Pakistani airport, and the intention was to get rid of planes. How do you deal with the propaganda issued by terrorists? Because our biggest enemies are not lone gunmen, they are terrorists. And
Sure.
this is another discussion that we might pursue later.
Yeah, well, there's no question the discussion is going to be going on for some time because we'll be talking about this and mental illness and how we stop these things that continue to happen. Gina, Ray, a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.